Hello, welcome to this video on the nature of quantitative research. Once you have identified your research topic, you need to make some very strategic decisions. And those decisions center around the appropriate methodology to adopt to obtain the empirical research to answer your question. This has to be considered in great depth and should also get support from your supervisor to give you direction on what methods to adopt. I'm going to glance through some methods here, but what I would recommend you do is review Bryman and Bell's textbook, which actually in the first half reviews quantitative research methods, and then the second half actually focuses on qualitative research methods. However, today we're looking at quantitative, but just to recap on the differences between the two methodologies or the approaches. Quantitative research, as the word states, quantity, actually relates to figures, numbers, percentages, statistics. And those statistics and numbers and figures can be generated through the use of survey research, be it large scale, medium, small scale, whatever, using various methodologies. And one of the methodologies could be questionnaires or structured interviews. Conversely, qualitative research explores attitudes, behaviours and experience through methods such as interviews or focus groups. Here, the attempt is to get an in-depth opinion from participants. So the difference between the two is that one generates opinions and the other actually generates figures, statistics. Now you have to consider what approach actually suits you as a researcher, and that's something to contemplate and consider. So quantitative research is used primarily for a number of reasons: for description, explanation and prediction. It could be to describe, for example, a population by determining what percentage of people would actually purchase a certain product if they are in a certain age group. Or it could be attitudes in terms of their interaction with a product or service or with a new government bill. So again, you're profiling the respondent's reaction and you're getting quantitative figures to actually support you on your discussion. As point 2 presents there, quantitative research is primarily used when you want to know how many and or how often. And for those answers, you need to use a quantitative approach. It is also the investigation of quantitative properties and phenomena, and then the relationship between the variables. So that is a key responsibility, in a sense, or outcome from a quantitative research approach, is you can actually validate a relationship as a result of the statistical analysis you conduct. So just to wrap up about quantitative uses, it's all about quantifying the relationship between variables, which can be descriptive or experimental. So you need to establish goals and objectives, but primarily the goals will have to be focusing around exploratory, cause and effects, or establishing relationship between variables. You also need objectives, and the objectives can also be stated in a hypothesis approach. So we're going to look at, first of all, the goals, and then we'll very briefly look at objectives or hypotheses for your thesis. So in terms of the goals, the purpose of the study may be, for example, exploratory. And here we're trying to find out or investigate, assess, generate or seek new answers, new insights, new questions. So you're exploring and you're giving estimates or guesstimates as a result of the quantitative results that you receive. Or it could be descriptive, and most questionnaires actually do have some form of descriptive questions of the respondent, asking their age category, asking about their gender, male, female, asking them to identify their highest level of education. So that could be the descriptive nature of your respondents, or you can also have a descriptive questions for an organisation. And then explanatory. Explanatory is primarily to look again at the relationship and the causal relationships between the variables or the phenomenon under discussion. So then if you can classify what type of purpose of study you're undertaking, this is showing a truly knowledgeable researcher. But again, you need to sit back and contemplate your purpose of study and make sure that is exactly what you're trying to achieve. So once we have the goals of our research, we need to identify our objectives. And those objectives can actually be stated as a hypothesis. I've provided a statement here by Fleming, who states that hypotheses are statements designating what the researcher expects to find. They expect basically to find a positive relationship between sales of umbrellas and rainfall. Kurlanger in 1979 and Mason and Bramble some 10 years later stated that a hypothesis represents a declarative statement of the relations between two or more variables. Additionally, hypotheses formalize the premises to be tested by the research effort and are derived from the observations and facts described in the research question. So what is this telling us? That is telling us before we can actually identify our objectives or hypotheses, we actually need to know what our research question is. And then when you break down that question into facts or observations, we then actually develop and formulate our objectives and hypotheses. So how is a hypothesis statement? Well, in research you have what's known as the null or the alternative hypothesis. Whichever one you actually present, it's up to yourself. I personally prefer the null hypothesis, but a lot of researchers also prefer to state it in the alternative without any declarative statement of the null hypothesis. So these are the hypotheses actually written for my own PhD, which I'm trying to show whether or not there is a difference or a relationship or a cause and effect between variables and also the ranking of certain things. So the statement is, there is no difference in the mean rank for the learning organization characteristics at the individual, team and organizational level. The alternative hypothesis is then stated in the positive, indicating there is a difference in the mean ranks, and this is what you're testing, and you quantify the result to be able to show, possibly through a chi-square test, whether or not there is a relationship between the variables. So what are the stages in the completion of quantitative research? Well, the first thing is you need to collect the data and know how to collect the data. Decide on your sample, you need to design the instrument to gather that data. This instrument needs to be tested before it's actually distributed to the masses. And then when you've gathered your information, you have to analyze your data. So a means of collecting data is through a survey, and that survey can be delivered face-to-face, by mail, telephone or email, or even a combination of the above. That's one method. Now, Bryman and Bell in their text describe many other quantitative approaches to data collection, but here I've just stated about surveys. So once we know the method that we're adopting, let's say email surveys, now we need to find out our sample. So we need to do a profile of our respondent. What type of people do we want to research? Do we want to research males only or females? Or do we want to survey only people who come from Donegal or from the west of Ireland? So you need to again consider and break down your profile of the respondent you want to sample. For your strategic commercialization plan, this is very, very important for you to make sure that you ask the right people. Maybe you need to talk to the purchasers or the owner managers or somebody in particular, and that you have actually a description and profile of that respondent prior to the issuing of your survey. Then we need to say, well, actually, what size of sample do we need? Well, there's no actual definitive number out there saying that you have to receive X amount in order for it to be a true sample. Well, basically, it's up to yourself. You should formulate a minimum or a maximum. Personally, I would say a sample of 40 for your strategic commercialization plan is a good start. For interviews, there are minimums that you should actually conduct your interviews with, and we will identify those in another video. So then we have our sample, we know our method of collection, now we actually have our research instrument. And the instrument or questionnaire is a document that is used to guide what questions are to be asked of respondents, and in what order, and then maybe also identifying alternative responses that are acceptable. So the instrument is the document asking the questions of the respondent. So what type of questions might there be? Well, basically, there could be open-ended questions, there could be closed or scaled response questions. An open-ended question is a question that encourages an answer phrased in respondents' own words, and you give them a box for them to complete this question. A closed-ended question is, in a sense, forcing the respondent to choose from a selection of responses and tick or indicate by a box which answer reflects their thoughts. And a scaled response question is basically to measure the intensity of a respondent's answer, like strongly agree, neutral or no opinion, strongly or disagree, and strongly disagree. So that's a scaled response question. And then pilot testing. This is crucial. Questionnaires must be pre-tested on a small sample of people who are representative of the population who you believe will be answering your survey. From that, you should be able to gather some views and opinion of the questionnaire. It could be that you have questions flowing incorrectly. Maybe the phrasing of some questions need to be changed. Maybe the number of questions need to be changed. Maybe more need to be asked or less need to be asked. Then we have the administration of the questionnaire. Use a personalised cover letter. Don't say "Dear Sir" or "Dear Madam." Say "Dear Mr. O'Donoghue." You should explain what the study is about. Explain why the respondent is important to the study. Promise confidentiality. Remember, going back to your research ethics form, where you indicate confidentiality or anonymity. Include a phone number to call if questions arise. Now, I had that in my own survey, and I was actually surprised for my PhD, the number of people who did ring me to find out, was I a real person? Was I a company trying to gather information or whatever? At the end of your one-page cover letter, thank the respondent for participating, but also don't forget to tell them how to actually respond. Do they complete the stamped addressed envelope that you've included? Or are you going to call back and collect the questionnaire or whatever? Present the questionnaire in a professional manner. Use fonts that are easy to read. Have it a nice appearance. And as I say, provide directions for how to answer. And then we have data analysis. Data analysis is a challenging section of any study, be it a strategic commercialization plan or a thesis. What is typical is the frequency output or a cross-analysis of data. A frequency output is basically showing the percent of your response who indicated yes or no. And cross-analysis of data is where you can take two variables or even three and compare and contrast them. And within that, you can do some statistical analysis as well. Use of SPSS or SurveyMonkey does the analysis for you in terms of frequency analysis and cross tabulations. SurveyMonkey will be described in another video, and SPSS, I would recommend that you look at a variety of textbooks, ones such as this text, which is SPSS, the Survival Manual. It does throw a lifeline to students and researchers grappling with data analysis. So in summary, a questionnaire is a powerful and evaluation tool. A questionnaire is only as good as the questions it contains. Design begins with an understanding of the capabilities of a questionnaire and how they can help you obtain relevant and accurate information to address your research objectives. I hope you enjoyed this video on the nature of quantitative research, and I look forward to seeing you another time. Thank you.